Allen Lund Company, 47 years young and a proud sponsor, wishes OOIDA all the best as you celebrate 50 years.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Redding.
The Federal Truck Leasing Task Force met Tuesday to discuss lease-purchase agreements. One of the participants was Jim Jefferson of OOIDA's Business Services Department, and observing was Andrew King of the OOIDA Foundation. I'll talk with them both about what happened and why it's important to trucking as an industry. A situation has come up that has serious potential consequences, drivers being stranded by their carriers. I'll discuss that, plus scam text messages and how to pull an MVR with Joe Biggs and Aron Lynch of OOIDA's Business Services Department. And finally, a decrease in load volume is what we can expect for the next couple of weeks before we see a seasonal bump in freight. Landline Now's Ashley Blackford has the latest with DAT in today's market update. But first, the news with Ashley Blackford.
Thanks, Mark. A question of whether the lease-purchase agreement model is worth saving was among those discussed at this week's Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration's Truck Leasing Task Force meeting. Jim Jefferson of OOIDA, who is a member of the Truck Leasing Task Force, spoke today about the meeting.
So basically, we're looking at all of the things that are wrong with a lease purchase agreement, from the carrier being able to control everything to you've got an equipment lease that says this guy is leasing this equipment with the option to purchase it, but then they're required to lease that equipment onto a specific carrier or a specific group of carriers. So now this carrier or group of carriers that you have to choose from is in a relationship with the equipment company, so they control everything.
We'll have more on this coming up later in our show. Results are in from this year's Brake Safety Week. From August 20th through the 26th, the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance conducted 18,875 commercial motor vehicle inspections in Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. Inspectors focused on the brake systems and components of CMVs. Of the total vehicles inspected, 87% did not have any brake-related out-of-service violations. 2,375 trucks were removed from roadways because inspectors discovered brake-related out-of-service violations. Those included broken brake drums, loose air tanks, and inoperative tractor protection valves, among other things. Of the nearly 2,400 trucks that were placed out of service, 295 had steering axle brake violations, 1,127 had standalone brake violations, and 1,394 failed the 20% defective brakes criterion. Following a train derailment that killed a truck driver over the weekend, efforts to reopen Interstate 25 in Colorado continue. The Denver Post reports that the cleanup could take longer than a week to complete. An investigation is also taking place to determine what caused the derailment. A state lawmaker in Pennsylvania is shining a light on the need for more truck parking. Representative Doyle Heffley said the lack of adequate truck parking poses a challenge to the state's trucking industry. He added that the demand for truck parking has surged due to various factors, including population growth, economic markets, and the escalating volume of imports. To help counter the issue, Heffley has offered a resolution to direct the Joint State Government Commission to conduct a thorough and comprehensive study of truck parking in Pennsylvania. He said the study is intended to provide recommendations for achieving adequate truck parking across the state. Doug Morris is the Director of State Government Affairs at OOIDA. He said the association has seen many truck parking studies and surveys, and that it's time to actually produce the space and pavement for additional spots. A truck driver was charged after U.S. Customs and Border Protection officers found 155 packages of cocaine in the floor of the trailer he was hauling. The incident happened earlier this month when the man applied for admission into the U.S. from Mexico at the Mariposa port of entry. During an inspection, officers discovered about 130 pounds of cocaine concealed in the floor of the trailer. The cocaine had an estimated value of $10 to $12 million. A conviction for possession with intent to distribute cocaine carries a maximum penalty of up to life in prison, with a mandatory minimum term of 10 years, a fine of $10 million or both, and a term of between 5 years and a lifetime of supervised release. The United States Attorney's Office, District of Arizona, is handling the prosecution. $10.7 million worth of methamphetamine was found in a shipment of fresh jalapeno peppers recently. U.S. Customs and Border Protection made the discovery this week at the Pharr International Bridge. A CBP officer referred a tractor-trailer for further inspection. That resulted in officers extracting 9,426 packages found in 72 buckets, amounting to a total weight of 1,205 pounds of methamphetamine concealed within the shipment. Officials seized the narcotics and the tractor-trailer. Special agents with Homeland Security Investigations initiated a criminal investigation. A report on young drivers and traffic fatalities was released this week. The Governor's Highway Safety Association did the report and found that the number of fatalities among young drivers is declining, but they are still much more likely to be involved in a fatal crash. GHSA analyzed 20 years of data. The summary of the study states that unlike older drivers, 21 years and up, young drivers are nearly 4 times more likely to be involved in a fatal crash despite driving less. The association says this is due to immaturity and inexperience. The data analysis found that fatal crashes involving a young driver decreased by 38% during the 20-year period, while fatal crashes involving an older driver increased by 7.5%. A reward is being offered for information that leads to an arrest of a man who threw a gallon of milk at a truck windshield in Jefferson County, Kansas. WIBW reports that last Friday evening, crews were called to the area of K4 and Detler Road, where they found a 2020 Peterbilt truck with a smashed windshield. Dashcam footage caught the incident on camera. The Jefferson County Sheriff's Office described the suspect as a man who was wearing a camo jacket. Lazy Ear Trucking is reportedly offering a $1,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of the man. No injuries were reported. Some changes to modernize commercial driver's license are coming to Missouri. This month, the Missouri State Highway Patrol and the Missouri Department of Revenue announced the upcoming changes. The agencies said the testing modifications will include a more streamlined pre-trip examination and a more efficient basic skills course. The changes will begin on December 4th and will be utilized by CDL examiners at all MSHP examination sites, as well as all third-party testing sites across the state. Efforts are underway in Louisiana to replace the I-10 bridge over the Calcasieu River. According to KPLC, Louisiana's Department of Transportation and Development Secretary is formally requesting approval from the Senate and House chairman of the Committees on Transportation, Highways, and Public Works to execute a public-private partnership contract with the bridge partners for the replacement of the 70-year-old bridge. The article states that the bridge lacks shoulders and the approach grades are steep. The $2.1 billion project has received some pushback over toll rates for the new bridge. The secretary states the toll rates are necessary to cover the costs of the project, but adds that all options are being explored. And finally, Halloween is less than 2 weeks away, and you might see a lot of pink this year. Barbie is expected to be the #1 costume choice for people, according to Google. The search engine uses data to list the top costumes. Following Barbie are a princess and Spider-Man. Couples costumes you'll likely see will be Barbie and Ken, Mario and Luigi, and Bonnie and Clyde. The list also includes what people might dress their four-legged friends up as. Those include Chucky, a spider, or a cow. That's Landline Now News for today. I'm Ashley Blackford.
Thanks, Ashley. Next, I'll talk with Jim Jefferson and Andrew King of OOIDA. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Control your toll costs and eliminate tolling headaches with Prepass Tolls. Prepass Tolls means toll volume discounts. Just one invoice for all tolls and fewer violations. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
Attention all truckers, Dean Michael, the tax doctor here. I want to talk to you about those dreaded tax problems. I know you want to keep on trucking and not even think about them, but let's face it, they're not going away all on their own. You need professional help. I've been helping truckers put their tax problems in the rearview mirror for years. I can help you too. Call me now for a free consultation at 888-557-4020 or go to mytaxhelpmd.com. It's like I always say, keep your eyes on the road, I'll keep mine on the IRS. 888-557-4020.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Landline now. Welcome back. The Federal Truck Leasing Task Force met Tuesday to discuss lease purchase agreements, and one of the participants was Jim Jefferson of OOIDA's Business Services Department, and observing was Andrew King of the OOIDA Foundation. They're both with me now here in Studio A to discuss what happened and why it's important to trucking as an industry. Guys, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for having me as well.
Before we get into this too far, Jim, talk about the task force. What is its assignment? What is it supposed to be doing here?
The assignment of the task force is to go over common lease purchase agreements, determine the pitfalls, where it is unfair, and see if we can develop an equitable solution for a lease purchase program. So basically, we're looking at all of the things that are wrong with a lease purchase agreement, from the carrier being able to control everything to you've got an equipment lease that says this guy is leasing this equipment with the option to purchase it, but then they're required to lease that equipment onto a specific carrier or a specific group of carriers. So now this carrier or group of carriers that you have to choose from is in a relationship with the equipment company, so they control everything. A lot of cases, you'll see a master lease come from that carrier that says they're going to deduct all of these payments and send them over to the lease purchase company, so you have no control over your money. The carrier controls how much money you can make by giving you loads or not giving you loads. And the equipment lease purchase that you've signed, those are typically non-transferable and non-cancelable, meaning once you've signed it, you're stuck in it. A lot of times you'll see folks that'll say, this is a walk-away lease. And when you look at the contracts themselves, part of it is, but part of it isn't. And the part that's typically walk-away is that carrier master lease where you're leasing that equipment on, and they say you can walk away. But when you sign the equipment lease, what says you're responsible for that $1,000 a month for the next, or $1,000 a week for the next 36 months, that one's non-transferable. It's non-cancelable. You're stuck with that. If you lose the truck, if you drive the truck off the lot 100 miles down the road, the engine blows, you're still required to make all of those payments.
As well as the dealing with the repair cost of that.
Absolutely.
That's something you were talking about before we went on the air, Andrew, is the shape of these trucks, the shape that they're in.
Yeah, so they had the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau did a report, and they presented here at this meeting, and they mentioned this in some of the things that they were able to research and look at, is that a lot of times when someone enters into a lease purchase, they don't really have a lot of options on what equipment they're choosing, and what they are looking at or what they are choosing is broken down. It's in horrible condition because basically they have done this several times, and this is what also we've been talking about. They might lease purchase to one guy. That guy never ends up able to get the truck. Everything falls apart. They fail, and so another guy comes in or gal, and they just keep doing this over and over and over again. And so the carrier is making a lot of money, not necessarily off the freight that you're hauling. They're making more money off of you lease purchasing this vehicle.
And in fact, they talked a little bit about that in terms of how much people were making versus how much the carrier was making. And it was a huge disparity.
Right. The carrier is going to take all of the expenses out of your settlement before you get paid anything. I mean, when you get into a situation like this, you're the last guy that's going to get paid. The equipment lease is going to get paid. The carrier is going to get paid. The fuel bill is going to get paid. Insurance, all the other expenses that are there is all going to get paid. And whatever's left is what goes into your pocket, which is typically less than what a company driver would make. In a lot of cases, you see these guys, the American dream. They want to be a truck driver. They want their own truck, which is great. I mean, I'm all for that. But it's the method that you use to get to that point that becomes the problem. When you go to a lease purchase, especially a lot of these lease purchase agreements that we see here on a regular basis, it's set up to benefit the carrier, to benefit the equipment company. If you could find a legitimate equipment lease that is from a third-party company and they say, here's this truck, this is our agreement. You pay us X amount of dollars per week, and at the end of this contract, you can buy this equipment, and you can take it wherever you want. You're the one that controls the payments. So if I lease it onto this carrier is going to pay me, then I will in turn around and pay for the lease equipment. If the carrier has the ability to take money from you, you're giving away all of your rights. It's your money, but the carrier's going to make the payment for you. So at that point, you're not really an independent contractor with a piece of equipment that you're buying. You're a glorified employee, and you're working for that carrier, and that carrier and your equipment lease company are working together to make as much money as they can. And they don't care about you. They keep you out on the road for months at a time, and you don't even make enough money to take care of your family back home.
Absolutely.
Well, in that report in particular, what you're mentioning, what they found was that a truck driver may take home as little as 67 cents a week, or as much as something like $20,000 a year, where the company's actually profiting like $95,000 a year. So kind of going along with Jim saying, it is completely in the favor of the carrier. One thing that stood out to me, and I know that we already understand this, but they kind of phrased it in such a way that just made you really think, is that you are going into debt, and the one who owns your debt is also paying you. They're also the responsibility of your actual job, your work condition. So there's something there that is kind of dangerous. You think about it really, is that I'm working for a company that not only controls my debt, but they also control my financial situation in general on how many miles I get, how many loads I get to take, how much I'm getting paid. And that is, to me, a recipe for disaster or potential failure.
Yeah. To put it in perspective, so you've got your lease purchase truck and you're going to make money, and say you're running 3,000 miles a week. You get $1.50 a mile. So you made $4,500 this week. And that's the advertisement that they'll put out there, that you can gross $4,500 a week. And that's the number that everybody sees. Well, I can make $4,500. But what you have to calculate into, and most people don't think about, is you got an equipment lease payment that comes out of that money. You got fuel expenses that come out of that money. You got taxes and tags and all these different expenses involving the truck itself that come out of that. You got the carrier's percentage that they get that comes out of that. So once you take all these expenses out, then you're left with, couple $100, and you still have to pay income tax on that. So you've got to set aside part of that money for income taxes. And at the end of the day, there's no money left for the trucker, the guy that's out there working his butt off. He's running as long as he can, trying to make as much money as he can, and he's never able to scrape together enough money to profit.
It's interesting. I was reading some of the stuff that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau put out, Andrew, that you mentioned earlier. Workers may be entirely unaware that they've agreed to take on debt to secure their job. And that, to me, is fascinating and kind of goes with what you're saying there, Jim.
Yeah. You're saying, you're accepting this truck, but now you've got to pay for that truck in order for you to work. But the company that you're working for controls how much money you're going to be able to make. So in essence, they control whether or not you're going to be successful. If you don't make enough money and you know what that number is, anybody that figures up their cost, they know what it's going to cost them to operate and pay for those expenses. So if I have to make a minimum of $2,500 a week to pay my expenses, but the company that I work for that is providing me this truck to pay for, if they only provide me $2,000 a week, I'm going in the whole $500 a week. And the company controls that.
Exactly. And to go along with that is, one of the other members of this task force is Paul Cullen. He made this point to mention that there are things like depreciation, other things that should be in a leasing agreement, lease purchase agreement, that are not found in them. So it's no wonder that when they did their research, they noticed and found that a lot of these individuals who join these types of agreements, they don't really understand exactly what they're getting into. They don't know the responsibilities. They don't know what they're looking for. And so this, again, it's kind of a predatory type of situation.
Well, and you talked earlier before we went on the air, Jim, about how they recruit people for this. You were mentioning, the difference between this and being a company driver. That's kind of how they get them into this.
Yeah, there are some companies out there that they'll post an ad for a company driver. So you got a new guy that's new to the industry, and he's ready to get started. He goes and he jumps on a plane. He flies out there, and you go through the orientation, and he goes through all the training that's required and takes his drug test, and he's ready to go. And then he goes to his recruiter, and his recruiter says, "Oh, I'm sorry. We don't have any company trucks available right now. I can put you on a waiting list, but we've got this great truck right here on this lease purchase program. If you're ready to go, we can get you signed up and get you in it. We've got a load hooked up and it's ready to go." And it's a lot of high pressure sales where they're pushing you. This truck's got to go. It's got to move. And, you got this new excited guy that wants to get out there. And, hey, this guy just told me I can have my own truck. So they sign the agreements and they jump in the truck and they start operating. But they haven't read that agreement. They don't understand the contract that they're signing and everything that's involved in that. And that's part of the problem with a lease purchase is you get guys that they're expected to sign, a 15, 20-page lease purchase contract and jump in a truck and go, and they don't understand what it means. And they don't have time to read it. I mean, I've talked to guys that said, they gave me 5 minutes. They told me I needed to sign this contract and go, or they were going to give it to somebody else. So it's high pressure, and they're not educated on what to look for and what's in those contracts, what they're actually signing away. I mean, when you take on that type of debt, it's very difficult to pay it back. And when you get a guy that you go down to the local bank and you try and get a loan to buy a truck, and the bank says, "No, your credit's not good enough. I can't do that. I'm not willing to take the risk." Then the guy thinks, okay, my only option is this lease purchase. How is it that a financial institution with millions of dollars says this guy's too high of a risk, I'm not going to give him the money? But then you go to this carrier, and this carrier's like, "Sure, no problem. I'll give you the money. I'll finance this for you." I mean, it's not done out of kindness of the carrier's heart to help this driver out. It's done for that carrier's bottom line because that carrier knows this equipment lease purchase is going to make me more money than that truck itself.
And they're all about the profit.
Yeah, as much money as they can make, and they'll use that driver up. And then they'll get another guy in there. I mean, I've talked to guys that have done the lease purchase, not once, not twice, but they're on their third or fourth time thinking, this one's going to be better. This one's going to be better. It's not going to be better until the system changes and it's an equitable situation for both sides of the party. I mean, it should be something, granted, if you're selling the equipment, you want to make a profit on your equipment. But if you're the guy that's buying the equipment, it should be an equitable purchase where that guy can make a living and pay for that equipment too. It should be success on both sides of that contract, not one-sided.
I want to end up with one thing that was said during this. Part of the purpose of this, or part of what was discussed, was coming up with regulations to make lease purchase more equitable. But there was one member of the committee that kind of took a different view on that, which was Paul Cullen Jr. And Jim, what was it that he said?
Well, Paul looked at it from the standpoint of everything that we were discussing in the meeting was all the negative and all the bad things about the lease purchase. So his take on it was, is there a reason to save this lease purchase, or should we just make it go away?
It's a very good question.
It's a very valid point.
Well, guys, we run out of time. I wish we could talk more, but thank you very much for all the information.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll be back in just a moment with more news and information. Please stay with us. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Firestone tires are for more of everything. More miles for every tire dollar, and more confidence in your fleet. At Firestone, we help fleets save with dependable value. Find your local Firestone dealer today at firestonetire.com/dealer.
Ready to make more money? Use a better load board. For a limited time, get 50% off Truckstop Load Board Pro. Just go to truckstop.com/go and enter promo code READY2023 when you purchase Load Board Pro.
When it's time to overhaul your truck engine, help protect it by insisting on a genuine Vibertech TVD crankshaft damper. Heavy duty, absolute premium quality, and they're made right here in the USA. Find a dealer at vibertechtvd.com.
Landline Now. Welcome back. Every day, truckers call OOIDA with problems they're encountering out on the road, looking for advice on how to handle those situations. And many of those truckers end up talking with OOIDA's Business Services Department. Here to discuss some recent problems and what the possible solutions are Aron, Lynch, and Joe Biggs of Business Services. Guys, thanks for joining me.
Thank you as always, Mark.
Thanks for having us on, Mark.
The first situation we've got here is drivers, when they're being terminated from their driving positions, are being stranded where they are. What have we heard from drivers? Can you tell us about any specific cases or stories of this happening?
Yeah, so most commonly it involves when you're in a lease purchase and you're either living in that truck itself or, you're paying on that truck and you don't make all the payments because they're starving you out and you can't get by as far as that goes. I had one guy call up here the other day. He was in the shower and he had gotten the truck taken from the lot while he was in the shower. Luckily, he had to change the clothes, but not much else. His cell phone, all of his personal belongings, wallet, and stuff like that were in the truck itself. So he had to go to the Flying J and actually make a phone call from there to try to see what was going on. He didn't even know that it was being taken. But that's just one of the things that happen, as far as that goes when you get involved in that. And it's not just prohibited to lease purchases. It's just in general, when you're being terminated from a contract, they don't have to bring you back to the terminal. They don't have to find you a way home. A lot of them will send you an airplane ticket or whatnot to go there, but not when you're coming back.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not just necessarily being stranded. I mean, they do a number of distasteful things. I had a guy call and I was talking to him. They got him a bus ticket back, but the bus wouldn't allow him to bring on his personal effects. He had his fridge and stuff like that, and then some sentimental value stuff. He went home. He started getting in contact with them. Hey, when can I get my stuff? Can you send it to me? Like, what's the situation there? Oh, we don't have that stuff. We don't know where that went. We didn't think it was ever even here. I mean, you're talking a good number of stuff, items that he had that now are gone. So I mean, they can leave you stranded to where you got to figure out how to get home, and maybe you don't have money because, like he said, they starved you out, or they send you on your way, say, yeah, we'll give you your stuff later, and then you never get it back.
So what advice can we offer people if you're in this situation? What can people do once they find themselves stranded somewhere?
So usually in most cases, when the writing's on the wall when it's going to happen. It's not usually a surprise. Maybe at that time in that time frame, but you can see it coming weeks in advance or at least days in advance. So to be able to prepare for it, you want to have some money set to the side so that you have the ability to be able to find your own way back on your own accord. As far as personal belongings, you want to keep that to a minimum. Now, it's different if you live in the truck itself, but, you're not going to be able to take, like Joe was saying, a microwave or a little mini fridge or something like that on a bus. It's even worse if you have, a pet, like a dog. You want to make arrangements so you always have something. If you plan on quitting yourself, you always want to make sure that you have the fuel to get where you need to go to be able to turn that back into the terminal, because a lot of times carriers will turn that fuel card off. That way you are stuck on the side of the road. And then all of a sudden you're looking at a truck abandonment because you have nowhere to go. So that's also a tactic that's been utilized that's not talked about enough, in my opinion. Making sure you have the resources or family or friends to be able to get your way back home is pretty necessary.
One of the things that I noticed in there you talked about is lease purchase, and I know that lease purchases are something that we strongly advise against in most cases. Is there anything you can do in terms of the lease purchase to avoid having this happen, or is that just something that's you're not able to alleviate?
Honestly, no. There's not a whole lot you can do because, like he said, most of the times you'll understand that that's what's going to happen. But there are instances where you're just running along. They say, "Yeah, just come back to the shop. We got to do some stuff," and then you're on your own. And I mean, there's not going to be anything in that lease agreement that gives you any alleviation from the issue. I mean, they're not going to say, "Okay, well, if we terminate you, we'll get you back home." Yada yada. That's not going to be in there. So at that point, I mean, there's not really much you can do.
Just avoid the lease purchase in the first place.
I would agree with that.
Okay. Let's go on to another topic here, and that is scam text messages. What sort of text scams are going on right now? Can you give us some examples?
One big one that I've been getting a lot of phone calls about are that reasonable suspicion training. And that's basically for a carrier that has multiple employees to be able to watch a video or whatnot. It's not necessarily, we call them scam text messages. It's not necessarily a scam. It's real. It's a real thing, but it doesn't apply to everyone. And sometimes these places are sending you links or sending you a website or whatnot to be able to go purchase it through them. And a lot of times it's either free or it may be $10 and they're charging $200. That's kind of where the scam or the solicitation comes in.
A reasonable suspicion, that deals with drug testing, right?
Correct. And just like CMCI, as part of OOIDA, we do that here, So you don't necessarily need to go outside of the metrics to get that.
Okay. Are there other scams going on right now by text message that you guys are aware of?
Typically, it's just about things like you said that are coming up. The MCS 150 update, that's a big one. They don't really look to see if you've done it. They just know that your DOT number, based off the numbers that it's up and coming. Towards the end of the year, you'll see UCR, stuff like that. Like you said, it's legitimate stuff, but they're either trying to charge you way too much or maybe it's not even the correct time for you to do it. But as far as any other type of scams, no, it's typically stuff like that.
How are they getting the phone numbers? Do we know?
It's public information. It's on Safer.
Okay. So there's nothing you can do in terms of that to get your phone number to where they can't get at it.
Well, and that's how they get your mailing address, too, because whatever address is on there, it's either you're going to be your house or your business address. It's on there as well, so you get it by mail. The only way they don't necessarily get it, they can even get your email to a certain degree if they have some of the methodology correct and down. That's a little bit harder, but yeah, they can get your information. It's all public online.
And the FMCSA, it's worth putting out there, will not text you for this stuff. Typically, it'll be mail. They will email on occasion, depending on what it is, but they will not text you asking you to update this stuff.
Yeah, FMCSA or DOT don't text.
How do you spot these scams that are kind of not scams so that you don't get taken in?
Typically, like a text, like we said, they're not going to text you. If you do get like a letter or an email, somewhere on there, it probably will say in the small print that we are not actually affiliated with the Department of Transportation, something of that sort. And if you have any concerns or hesitations, just give us a shout in the Compliance Center. We'll discuss it with you and let you know if it's legitimate or not.
Yeah, or we'll put our heads together, and if we don't know the answer right away when you call, we'll hang up and we'll call you back the same day, and we'll put all of our heads together and figure out one way or another if it's truly legitimate or not, even if we have to make the phone call or try to reach out on your behalf.
And folks, if you do need to do that, the phone number is 816-229-5791. Again, 816-229-5791. Guys, let's go on to one other topic here, and that is pulling your MVR or motor vehicle record. Who do you contact? What is your first step here?
So to pull your MVR, you can do it a few different ways, right? So you can go down to the DMV and pull your motor vehicle record. It's a small fee, it's a one-time fee, and it's basically just an abstract record of your driving record. You can also, in some states, not all, but some states, do it online. You can literally type in Google, get MVR Florida, get MVR Arkansas, things of that nature, and they will pull up, and you can do it online. There's still a fee associated with that, too. We also do it in the Compliance Connections program that we offer here. You can call us up, and we can get you over there. They pull it for a fee as well. That's just a few things that you can do to try to do that. And you got to do it on a yearly basis. Keep in mind, this is a requirement to keep in your actual driver file for every driver. You have to pull one on each driver once a year.
Even if you're the driver and the owner?
Correct.
That's one of the key things there is a lot of these things when you're your own carrier, you've got to pull it on yourself as if you're an employee.
Correct. You have to treat yourself like you're hiring yourself. And a lot of people don't understand that, or it doesn't make sense. But that is the way to go.
Who else may be looking at your MVR? I mean, who else is trying to get access to that or can get access to that, and how can it affect you?
Typically, the only people who can get it without your consent would be insurance companies. They'd be the ones looking at it to determine your liability. Brokers and people of that nature, they're not going to be able to get that unless you voluntarily hand it over. That's not typically public access. You have to be a certain group, or yourself as the individual who can pull that information.
What sort of information is in there? I mean, you mentioned a little bit there, Aron, but I'm wondering if you can go into a little bit more detail on what kind of information is in your MVR.
So an MVR is available in each state, right? And it's going to be a record of your violations or past history. And it's going to be a record of any crash that you've had in the last few years as well. Depends on how far you pull it back, if you do a 3-year, 5-year, or a 10-year. So it's basically crashes and violations.
Okay. Let's go on to one last topic here, and that is brokers who are charging exorbitant amounts in late fees for loads. What are we hearing from drivers? I mean, what are they saying about this?
That they're trying to nickel and dime them. They feel like anytime they make the wrong move, there's a huge fee associated with it. I spoke to a guy probably a month or two ago. He got to the receiver. He was 15 minutes early and was told to go back around to the end of the line. Well, at that point he was late, and he got hit with like a $250 late fee. It's just things to charge the carrier or the driver even more. And they try to use it as to keep you on time and all that and keep everything flowing. But sometimes it seems a little predatory.
Is this the shippers or the brokers that are doing this?
This is strictly the brokers. In most of the cases that I've looked into in depth, they'll blame it on the shippers. But then when you ask for proof that there was some kind of fee associated with that, they're unable to provide it, or they're just flat out refuse. Some of them that I've called personally. So I can't for certain say it's just the brokers, but I'm pretty confident in saying that it has nothing to do with the shippers. That, like Joe said, they're even in more instances, it's more than just nickel and diming. In the contract, it'll say we'll charge you $150 for being late, right? But then there's a $600 fee when you get charged, and then when you call that broker, you try to explain the situation, and you've been in communication this whole time. Well, why is it $600? Well, the shipper told us. Well, where's the proof of that? Well, we don't have to show you.
Right. And the agreement, you'll typically sign your rights away to see any documentation validating whatever claims they want to make.
And there's the thing is, you've got to read the contract. This is something that's typically in the contract.
Typically, yes. Now, there are times where it's not in there, but more than likely it's going to be in there saying there's going to be fees for this, that, and the other. And you definitely want to read that contract. You need to know what you're agreeing to and what you're agreeing to give away, essentially, as far as, what protects you as the carrier.
In terms of avoiding situations like this or avoiding these kind of late fees, is there anything besides just making sure that it's not in the contract? Is there anything you can do to help alleviate the situation?
Check credit scores. Work with brokers that you know that you've done business with before.
Okay. Well, guys, we ran out of time, but I want to thank you very much for the information on all this stuff.
I appreciate you having us on, Mark.
As always, thanks.
I've been talking with Joe Biggs and Aron Lynch of OOIDA's Business Services Department. We'll be back in just a moment with more news and information. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Landline Now, welcome back. There are a number of critical questions you need to answer in order to run a successful trucking business. Among the most important of those questions are, where's the freight going to be, and how much is it going to pay? Today, Landline Now senior correspondent Ashley Blackford will bring us answers to both of those important questions with a look at this week's freight markets with the folks from DAT. Here's Ashley now with the report.
Thanks, Mark, and hello once again to Robert Rouse with DAT. How are you doing today, Robert?
I'm doing great, Ashley. Thanks for asking.
Starting off, can you provide me an update on the current activities and trends in the spot market?
Yeah, absolutely. Last week, we saw just over a 3.5% decrease in total load volumes, down to just over 1.1 million loads. We expect to have about a similar volume of loads within a couple percentage points for the next 3 to 4 weeks before we see a traditional seasonal bump in freight. So that's kind of where we see it, and we shouldn't see too much movement up or down with total load volumes. When we look at the number of trucks on the DAT load board, they also decreased by around 2%, down to 389,000 trucks. Most of the decrease in trucks last week was actually in reefers, though. They decreased about 5% from the prior week, and vans and flatbeds only came down about 1%. So that mostly was reefers that were doing other things. The last few weeks, we've seen diesel prices around the country start to drop by over 15 cents a gallon. And even now, it just came out that it's all the way down to $4.44 a gallon. While that is really great news, diesel prices are going to be a major concern again coming up. And here's why. West Texas Intermediate Crude posted the largest one-day gain since April last Friday. And that was mainly over concerns about the Middle East conflict and how that could affect regional oil production. To give you a reference of why the Middle East matters to everybody here in the States, the Middle East actually makes up over 30% of the global oil production. And so if there's more regional conflict in the Middle East, could take some of that oil production offline, which would then drive up the cost for the Texas crude oil as well. And while we're not near the peaks we saw in 2022, there is a concern that a protracted conflict in the Middle East will have major impacts in the next couple of weeks or even the next couple of months, just depending on how long that conflict sustains over there in the Middle East. When we look at the overall spot market, last week we saw load-to-truck ratios remain pretty flat from last week. For historical context, reefers and flatbeds are at about a 7-year low for load-to-truck ratios. Both are well below where we saw the market performing in 2019. However, vans are actually seeing load-to-truck ratios higher than we saw in 2018 and 2019. When you look at this week's van load-to-truck ratio, spot market loads decreased for the second week, dropping by about 5% week over week and about 48% year over year. But carrier equipment posts decreased slightly in line with the steady flow of carrier exits in the long haul sector. And that resulted in last week's dry van load-to-truck ratio mainly remaining flat at 2.09. And lastly, looking at rates, national benchmark broker-to-carrier spot rates without fuel decreased by about 2 cents per mile for vans and reefers. Van and reefer line haul rates lose a little more ground and still seem to be searching for that bottom of the market. The good news is flatbeds held pretty steady and a much better week for the flatbed carriers nationwide.
As construction starts to slow down for flatbed, what areas of the economy should owner-operators look for?
Yeah, it's going to be, winter is always a slower time for the flatbed market. But the good news is new manufacturing orders are on the rise for flatbed carriers. Manufacturing accounts for around 60% of truckload demand, making the most recent data pretty good news for flatbed carriers. Data published by the U.S. Census Bureau reported that new orders for manufactured goods, factory orders, increased by about 6.7 billion, or about 1.2%, to about 586.1 billion in August. This follows a 2.1% decrease recorded in July and came in better than the market expectations for an increase of 0.03. When we look at new orders for manufactured durable goods in August, they were up for the 5 of the last 6 months and increased by 0.4 billion to 284 billion. And that's down from the previously published 0.2% increase. And that's what the report showed us. When we look into what those things are, orders for computers, electronic products gained about 3%. Electrical equipment, appliances, and components orders jumped by 1%. And machinery orders gained 0.6%. Civilian aircraft orders fell about 15.9%, and while motor vehicle orders rose 0.3%, and then shipment of manufactured goods soared by 1.3%. Manufactured good inventory also rose, with unfulfilled orders increasing by 0.4%. And while we look at how that impacts the greater market and how carriers could look at it, when looking at the states with the largest numbers of manufacturers, there's really 3 states that I want to highlight. Texas, Ohio, and Illinois. While Texas is known for oil production, which is a huge piece of flatbed market, there's been a rise of manufacturing for machinery, cars, aerospace, and metals over the past few years. And when you look at the Texas state website, there's a ton of new projects that are in the work to continue expanding manufacturing in that region. For example, Tesla came in recently to Texas, as well as a lot more manufacturing. So look for Texas to be on the rise for more loads, specifically on manufactured goods. Ohio is the 3rd in the United States for manufacturing. The Buckeye State is super strong in industrial machinery, fabricated metals, and transportation equipment. Ohio is also a major exporter. And according to export.gov, Ohio is the 9th largest state exporter of goods in the whole United States, with 54.4 billion worth of manufactured good exports in 2018. So that's another state to be watching. And lastly, this is actually important to flatbed carriers. Really, in Illinois, Caterpillar is the major manufacturer that produces a ton of farm machinery. The East Peoria facility focused on equipment transmissions for the construction industry and powertrain systems. So that's another place to be looking for loads.
Understanding truckload spot rates is critical to understanding supply and demand trends. What are the advantages of tracking spot rates in real time?
Yeah, when owner-operators monitor spot rates as well as demand trends, they can adjust pricing and capacity allocations to maximize profitability. Spot rates and contract rates are not in sync at this time. Therefore, operators may need to move in a different direction as the market continues to change. By utilizing real-time truck spot market data and the cutting-edge technology that provides them, owner-operators can secure the best rates for their loads. And for the remainder of 2023, and likely at least the second quarter of 2024, most analysts are predicting that the overall rates will remain pretty flat on a national basis. However, there's always going to be hot markets, and markets where like produce is being harvested, manufacturer supply chains require trucks on an immediate basis. Those areas are going to be where you're going to find the best rates. Such markets provide opportunities for rates that are higher in those regions versus the whole nation. For example, in the coming weeks, the Christmas tree market will begin in the Pacific Northwest. Another example is the current UAW auto strike. Carriers that supply the auto production plants have lost business because of the strike. However, whenever that strike ends, there'll be a tremendous pent-up demand for carriers to haul parts so that production can get ramped back up.
If our listeners want more information, where can they go for that?
Yeah, you can always get the latest rate information at dat.com/trendlines or look at the weekly market updates on the DAT blog. They're published every Wednesday. Lastly, check out and subscribe to the DAT IQ channel on YouTube, where analytics team and forecasting teams take deep dives into the freight markets each week.
All right, Robert, thank you so much.
Thanks, Ashley.
That was Robert Rouse with DAT. Mark, back to you.
Thanks, Ashley. That's our program for today. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife,
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
chrome,
and I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us.
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.